Hello everyone, I'm Killer5362 and today I have for you declassified government information that has been sanitized, meaning that it's no longer classified, it's no longer secret information, and they've had some things blocked out. But this is now public information available at CIA.gov, it is part of the Freedom of Information Act. And so I'm going to be going through here with you and reading out loud for you this declassified, previously top secret information that was released for public in 2011, November 10th. Memorandum for Director of Central Intelligence, Deputy Director of Central Intelligence. From unknown, acting NOI for economics. Economics cost of the Chernobyl incidents. 1. I believe many analysts are overestimating the economic cost of the Chernobyl accident to the USSR. The attached articles, attachments A and B, imply the costs will be high indeed. I think Moscow can contain the economic cost to well under 10 billion. Keeping them well within the limits of a very significant but hardly catastrophic natural disaster. 2. According to the analyst for Sova, loss of grain, livestock, and farmland will be minimal. For other costs, it's only possible, of course, to make order of magnitude estimates to this point. Assuming that the permanent relocation of 10,000 families in the area at $20,000 each, the total cost would be $2 billion plus, say $500 million for the temporary relocation of others in a wider 30-kilometer area. We have reports that those relocated are already being put to work. The loss of the 4 reactors amounts to perhaps $4 billion in capital costs. It is possible, however, that in time, reactors 1 and 2 could be returned to service depending on the levels of radiation in the immediate area and estimates of cleanup costs relative to new construction. Cleanup costs, including covering radioactive earth plus loss of farmland, livestock, etc., could total another $1 billion or so, assuming the Soviets do not apply strict Western standards to contamination of meat and dairy products. In addition to capital cost, loss of the 4 reactors represents an annual loss of power equal to 100,000 oil worth about 550 million per year. It is impossible at this point to gauge longer-term costs such as delay in the power program, increased costs to improve reactor design, etc. In attached article, attachment C, Goldman argues that the accident is a major blow to Gorbachev's effort at economic reform. I think it is more appropriately viewed as an indication of the lack of maneuvering room Gorbachev has to meet any single major economic emergency, including major crop failures, let alone back-to-back problems such as the Chernobyl incidents, followed by a crop failure. He cannot, I believe, afford to shut down all reactors of similar design for extended period, owing to the cost of fossil-fueled replacement power. Similarly, the grid cannot accommodate such losses. The system experienced periodic brownouts even before the accident. As an aside, I would like to know what the power production targets were for these 4 reactors, whether these targets were raised under Gorbachev, and whether our people think the rate of capacity utilization allowed time for proper maintenance. SOVA has drafted an article on the economic impact of Chernobyl on the USSR. EURA is doing an article on the cost to Eastern Europe. This memorandum was reviewed by SOVA. This part is blurred out. Attachments. These are the attachments. This part's blurred out. Don't know what's there. And this secret thing is blurred out as well. Chernobyl's impact on foreign trade. There have been a lot of rumors, but few hard facts of any direct impact on foreign trade. Should oil be needed as feedstock for power plants to replace the power lost from Chernobyl, then foregone oil earnings are approximately $550 million for every 100,000 BD at $15 per barrel. There have been many rumors of increased gain purchases, but, again, few hard facts. Indeed, given current HC constraints and some statements about cutting back imports sharply, especially for consumer goods, the Soviets may forego any food imports to replace losses, particularly if they're not significant. There may be some minor HC outlays to fight the disaster, such as the purchase of West German robots or the payments to medical specialists. There has been some speculation in the West German press about farmers bringing a suit against the Soviet Union to recover damages. The amount mentioned was 500 million. This may lead to nowhere. Western bankers may use this accident as one more reason to up the prices of borrowing from the Soviets. So far, they had kept their rates low despite the poor oil market, but this may change their minds. May 15, 1986, USSR, domestic impact of the Chernobyl accident. Our preliminary assessment of the impact on the Soviet economy of the April 26th nuclear accident at the Chernobyl power plant is that the long-term damage will be small. Although the cost of evacuation, permanent resettlement, and cleanup will be large, possibly on the order of billions of rupees, lasting damage to agriculture, industrial facilities, and the environments will be limited to a fairly small area. We believe that Moscow can contain these costs and keep them within range of those associated with a significant but hardly catastrophic natural disaster. It will be a long time before the full economic impact of the accident is realized, but we believe there are a number of preliminary assessments that can be made. The evacuation. According to the Soviet press, the nearby town of Pripyat, population 47,000, was evacuated the day after the incident occurred. An 1,100 bus convoy reportedly completed the operation in less than 3 hours. It was not until the 4th of May, however, that the town of Chernobyl, population 44,000, 15 kilometers from the damaged plant, was evacuated. The Soviets' decision may have been the result of shift in wind direction. The evacuation was completed 2 days later. Host areas for the evacuees included towns and rural areas in Belorussia, north of Chernobyl, and villages to the south of the plant. See Figure 1. I assume this is Figure 1. Alright. So, this is Chernobyl, Soviet Union, Moscow. Here are the evacuation sites. So, if this is where the power plant was, they have evacuated people within this area, and it looks like this is where they are sending the people to go to. And also these places as well. As of the 12th of May, Moscow acknowledged that 92,000 persons has been evacuated from a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plants. We estimate the population of this area to be 150,000 to 180,000, including the two towns of Pripyat and Chernobyl, and the surrounding rural population. It is likely that many fled on foot with their livestock before official vehicles arrived. In addition to the official evacuees, thousands of persons, mostly women and children, have left Kiev and other cities outside the 30-kilometer area. Soviet authorities tactically supported the exodus from Kiev by scheduling extra trains and planes to transport those wanting to leave the city. The great bulk of the 2.4 million residents of the Ukrainian capital have chosen to stay. It is difficult to estimate the cost of evacuation, but assuming military units were involved, little incremental costs would accrue to the Soviets. Volunteers are housing many of the evacuees, and existing housing is properly decontaminated. Residents could begin returning in a month or so. It is likely that permanent relocation will be required for some of the population, and in some areas, the evacuees are already being put to work. The largest expense for the decontamination and cleanup near the largest expense will be for the decontamination and cleanup near the reactor sites. The Soviets report that Chernobyl's Unit 4 will be permanently encased in concrete following an injection of liquid nitrogen below the reactor itself. So, what happened at Chernobyl? Our best estimate of the cause of the accident is that there was a loss of power to the Chernobyl's complex as Reactor 4 was going into planned shutdown and subsequent failure of emergency diesel generators to start. Without power, the cooling systems could not work and the fuel began to overheat. The overheating of the nuclear reactor, coupled with a possible rupture of the feed water tubes running through the reactor, caused a reaction between steam, fuel, and granite that produced hydrogen gas. The gas built up until it exploded, shattering the steam lines in the adjacent steam separator and destroying the upper portion of the reactor hull. This added air to the overheated graphite, caused a fire. At this point, at least some of the uranium fuel was melting. The destruction of the reactor hull allowed large quantities of radioactivity to escape. By this time, everyone in the immediate area, estimated at 50 to 100 workers, was probably exposed to a lethal dose of radiation. Helicopters were used to drop sand, lead, beads, clay, dolomite, and boron into the burning reactor. The fire was finally extinguished on the 11th or 12th of May. Impact on agriculture. Agricultural production in the Soviet Union is highly diffuse and is unlikely to be dramatically affected by one event of this kind. Damage to farming regions beyond the immediate area of the accident is likely to be minimal. The initial plume of radioactivity appears to have passed over an area covered largely by forests and swamps. Not more than 15 to 25% of the crop and pasture land in the Chernobyl area would have been seriously affected. Assuming the contamination is localized, we do not anticipate substantial long-term effects on the international commodity supplies or trade. Nevertheless, farming activities near the site are likely to be affected. Winter grains planted last fall and sugar beets, which are just emerging, have been exposed to radioactive particles settling on leaves. Some of this radiation will be incorporated into the plants. Lightly contaminated grains will be mixed with clean grain during the milling to dilute any harmful effects, but any heavily contaminated grain will have to be collected and disposed of. Sugar beets exposed to radiation would tend to concentrate radioactivity in the roots and would likely have to be destroyed. Many crops, however, have not yet been planted or are still underground and safe from radiation. According to U.S. experts, spring grains and vegetables can be planted in areas of light contamination because most of these crops, with the exception of sunflowers, do not absorb radiation through their roots. Dangerous to humans, however, could result from contaminated dust raised by machinery in fields during planting, subsequent spraying, and harvesting. The Soviets reportedly are applying some kind of film to the surface near the reactor to prevent radioactive dust and particles from getting into the soil and water. Through monitoring and decontamination of workers, equipment, and crops in the Chernobyl area will be necessary, slowing fieldwork. Even in those areas where contamination is light, crops could suffer losses if normal spring field operations are delayed. Workers may be kept from the fields as a safety precaution or diverted to cleanup operations. Growing seasons in the USSR are short and harvests are frequently disrupted by early onset of winter. The livestock industry may be more seriously disrupted in the area because of farm animals, although not adversely affected by low levels of contamination, will concentrate radiation in their tissues with prolonged intake. Some rangeland may have to be taken out of use until the radiation drops to acceptable levels. Grazing animals may have to be fed in stalls or in the immediate vicinity of the reactor, butchered. Indeed, we have already seen reports of livestock destruction because of high radiation levels. Livestock that have ingested contaminated feed should survive if quickly switched to clean feed. Radioactivity not excreted by these animals would be localized in the organs generally not consumed by humans, such as thyroid and bones. Soviet data show, however, that Chernobyl's region accounts for a minuscule share of total farm output in the Ukraine. The local dairy industry will be most severely affected because of the impact of the fallout on cows and milk where radioactive iodine concentrates. Cattle fed contaminated feed will produce hazardous milk for up to 2 months after switching to clean feed. Soviet dairy authorities, let's take a look at this. So this is the region as a share of the Ukrainian Republic. 0% are milk cows, 0.1% is milk, 0.1% is hogs, 0.1% is cattle, 0.1% is farmland, and 0.05 is vegetables. So, Soviet dairy authorities will have to monitor condemned milk dispensaries carefully to ensure that no one reaches black market channel. Ooh, interesting. The Chernobyl's power plant is located just north of the Kiev reservoir that supplies the bulk of the drinking water for the Ukraine's capital. Some radiation was undoubtedly carried by the reservoir by winds and by the two major rivers feeding it. Because these rivers drain directly through the most heavily contaminated areas, radiation levels in the water will rise over the next several weeks. Radioactivity will concentrate in aquatic plants and fish, perhaps making the latter unfit for human consumption. Eventually, the contamination could be carried to other reservoirs further down the Dnieper. I'm sorry, I don't speak German, so I can't pronounce that correctly. The Soviets have constructed dikes along the Pripyat near the reactor to prevent rain from carrying surface contaminants into the river. Soviet environmental authorities, however, maintain that regular water samples are being taken from the Kiev reservoir and that they show levels beyond established norms. below established norms. Local industry. An inventory of industrial facilities within the 30-kilometer zone around the reactors reveals only a small number of civilian plants, including perhaps 10 food processing sites, 3 textile mills, a railroad repair yard, and a small thermal power plant. The evacuation is likely to have disrupted production at several of these facilities. How long will they be affected remains an open question, depending on the degree of contamination and the extent the Soviets want to preserve their operation. Moscow has already discussed bringing the undamaged reactors at Chernobyl back online as quickly as possible, so presumably the Soviets would also attempt to help local industry recover as well. In all likelihood, the incident disrupted, at least temporarily, electricity supplies within a 30-kilometer area. All industries suffer problems in the event of brownouts or blackouts, but the largest users of energy, metal processing, cement, food processing, and chemicals, would be the hardest hit from resulting damage to machinery and products in process. We have no information to date regarding specific disruptions in electrical power supplies to local industry. Like electricity, all industrial facilities depend on water for cooling and processing. If the Soviets have or choose to cut off water supplies in the area, the industries most valuable to production cutbacks would be chemicals and metallurgy, as well as the companion thermal power plants. Switching to closed water systems, however, could ease the potential shortages for plants in appropriate locations. The use of irrad- ir- irradiated water in the processing has the potential to alter end products, particularly in the chemical and food sectors. We have received no reportings of disruptions in the industrial water supplies in the area. For the electricity supplies, the shutdown of the four 1,000 megawatt reactors at the Chernobyl will probably have a wider range of effects, both direct and indirect. During the summer, lull in electricity demand, the Soviets will be in a favorable position to compensate for most of the power losses associated with Chernobyl by using other generating capacities more intensely. Beginning in August, however, the upsurge in demand will probably eliminate most of the painless adjustment mechanisms. 4 additional reactors identical to the damaged one at Chernobyl, 2 at Kursk, and possibly 2 more at Smolensk may not now be operational. We cannot be certain whether these other reactors are completely shut down or operating at reduced power levels for safety reasons. Indeed, we cannot be certain whether all these reactors, if they are in fact shut down, were all taken offline in response to the Chernobyl accident. Moscow would need strong justification to disrupt the economy further by shutting down the remaining 7 graphite moderated boiling water reactors, RBMK, similar to those at Chernobyl, unless the cause of accident is deemed to have stemmed from basic design faults. The total effect of the confirmed shutdowns at Chernobyl and the likely shutdown at Kursk and Smolensk, assuming the latter reactors remain out of service for the remainder of the year, will be to reduce Soviet power output in 1986 by about 50 billion kilowatt hours, or 3 to 4% of the annual total. The impact, however, is concentrated on 2 power grids, the central unified electricity grids, OES and the South OES, which will experience much greater losses of about 15% and 10% respectively. Power cuts of this magnitude can seriously affect key economic activities in the Ukraine and Moscow area. We believe the Soviets will attempt to ease the impact by drawing electricity from adjoining grids in the northern Caucasus, and possibly from more distant grids in the Urals and Kazakhstan. Moscow may also request that Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland reduce imports of electricity from the Ukraine. Roughly 20 billion kilowatt hours was sent to these countries in 1985. Cutting exports to Eastern Europe, however, may not be a politically attractive way to ease this crunch. The Soviets could compensate for the loss of electricity over the next several months if they forego maintenance, normally scheduled for the summer, at power plants using fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, coal, and peats, and operate them at full winter capacities. Increasing output at conventional plants, however, would only be a stopgap measure. Maintenance will still be performed, and if not finished by the winter, the Soviets will be even harder pressed to meet the surge in demand that will take place. In any event, domestic supplies of fossil fuels will have to be supplemented with sizable increase in domestic fuel production and possibly with imports, such as additional coal from Poland. As the Soviets move to replace electricity from the effective RBMK reactors with power from conventional plants, they will need to use plants connected to the right grids, as well as additional fuel of perhaps 150,000 barrels per day oil equivalent to replace the Chernobyl reactors, or twice that much if the other 4 reactors are shut down. The long-term impact of the Chernobyl disaster on the USSR's ambitious nuclear program is likely to be significant. The Soviets currently have 28,300 megawatts of nuclear generating capacity, supplying some 11% of their electricity. Moscow's plans call for an expansion of nuclear capacity to 70,000 megawatts by 1990, boosting the nuclear share of total electricity output to more than 20%. The accident will prompt the Soviets to at least put construction of new RBMK reactors on hold temporarily. The Soviet decision to allow placement of nuclear plants closer to populated areas to supply centralized district heating systems is likely to be re-examined. Political fallouts. The accident is likely to have significant political repercussions inside the USSR. At the least, it will break Gorbachev's momentum and disrupt his effort to inspire optimism among the public. The regime badly bundled public relations on the first days, reacting in traditional Soviet fashion of trying to conceal from its own population and the world the fact that there was an accident. The incorrect assessment of serious and of the incorrect assessment of the seriousness of the incident by local officials may have caused some delay. But once it became clear that the West could independently assess the disaster, that Soviet citizens were hearing about it from foreign sources, and that a large-scale evacuation would be required, Moscow shifted its approach. In an effort to absolve the top leadership of responsibility, Soviet authorities are blaming low-level local officials for the mishandling of the situation. Boris Sherbina, deputy premier and head of the International Investigating Commission set up by Moscow, said that local experts did not make a true assessment of the accident quickly enough. Pravda reported on May 12th that two transport officials at the plant and a plant party secretary had been punished for failing to meet the needs of the evacuees and for providing delayed and inaccurate information on the accident. Ukrainian party leader Vladimir Sherbitsky could eventually be held responsible. Gorbachev has been widely suspected of wanting him out, and a public statement of Ukrainian Premier Lyashchenko was defensive about the initial handling of the disaster, suggesting Republic officials were under criticism from Moscow. Scapegoats may also be sought within the Central Party and government apparatus. Vladimir Dolgik, the party secretary in charge of the energy sector, is one of the only two Brezhnev holders in the secretariat. His failure to be named to the head of the investigation commission could spell trouble for him. In the government's Minister of Power and Electrification, Mayoretz is the official most directly responsible for the power plant. He was criticized for inefficient management at the party Congress earlier this year. General Secretary Gorbachev himself remained in the background in dealing with the Chernobyl incident, allowing other Soviet leaders to assume high-profile roles during the crisis until the 14th of May. He may have believed that his visible public involvement would have increased public alarm. He also may have waited to speak until it was clear that the situation was well under control in order to avoid giving reassurances that would eventually turn out to be unduly optimistic. Insert stuff from the speech, if any. Alright, so from here we have, it looks like a news article by Marshall I. Goldman, A Threat to Soviet Economic Reform. While there is obviously never a good time for a nuclear meltdown, the Chernobyl disaster comes at a particularly awkward moment for the Soviet economy. It may well abort Mikhail S. Gorbachev's ambitious effort to turn the Soviet economy around. Before Chernobyl, Mr. Gorbachev's effort to discipline and motivate the Soviet workforce were beginning to bear fruits. According to official Soviet data, in the first 3 months of 1986, industrial production rose 6.7% and labor productivity 6.3% over the comparable period in 1985. Even oil production was increasing again, since Mr. Gorbachev made a personal tour of the West Siberian oil fields last year, fired several officials, and criticized many more. Production, which at one point was down by 4% on a monthly basis, has rebounded to a 2% growth rate, comparable with the same month a year before. Equally impressive, steel production increased by 10% in the first quarter of 1986, compared with the year earlier, something not seen for a decade or more. Building on this momentum, Mr. Gorbachev seemed to be preparing to bring high technology and a better services to the Soviet Union so that it would be competitive with the United States, not only in military strength but in economic sophistication. Given the resistance to previous attempts at reform, this may have been an unattainable dream. But to make any inroads, Mr. Gorbachev realized he would have to establish his credibility as a manager and a leader, and he seems to be doing just that until Chernobyl. The accident jeopardizes not only his credibility but also the economic momentum that he has generated. There is no way Mr. Gorbachev would have escaped at least some criticism for Chernobyl, but the inept, if not unconscionable, the way the Soviet people have been kept in the dark about the potential dangers has turned a bad situation into one with unusually serious and enduring consequences. The first economic casualty, then, is the sense that the Soviet Union had finally found itself a leader who would provide his people with the openness and respect that they have so long been denied. As the editors of Sovietskaya Rossiya, a Moscow newspaper, said in January, in the interest of truth and of speaking openly with people on all vital questions, our information must be up to date, accurate, and complete. For Mr. Gorbachev, Chernobyl fails on all three accounts. The second casualty is the Soviet energy industry. At a minimum, Chernobyl's four generating units, with a total capacity of 4,000 megawatts, will be out of commission for the foreseeable future. Even though the units account for almost one half of the Ukraine's electrical capacity, nuclear generation provides only 11% of the Soviet Union's total electrical power. So the loss of Chernobyl is not irreplaceable, particularly now that the weather is warmer and the days sunnier. Yet, in a country long accustomed to brownouts, any loss of capacity hurts. Moreover, the accident will slow the Soviets' nuclear drive, requiring the division for electricity generation of more natural gas, coal, and possibly some petroleum that otherwise could be set aside for hard currency exports. Fortunately for Mr. Gorbachev, oil production is increasing again, but that increase will not compensate for the fall in world oil prices, all the more so if more energy must be kept for home consumption. The last thing Soviets need is a further crimp in their hard currency earning abilities. Soviet foreign debt will increase by over $5 billion this year because of falling oil prices. The recent shift in the winds to the south and east from Chernobyl is putting many important Soviet crops in the country's rich black soil zone at a risk. Assuming Soviet leaders do the right thing, which at this point is not all that certain, they will destroy some of these crops, which will necessitate increased imports. For a nation that imported $7 billion of grain in 1984, any further loss is unwelcome, though by no means devastating. None of these setbacks is insurmountable. The more important consequence of Chernobyl may be the dashing of Mr. Gorbachev's hope for reform, innovation, and inspired leadership. The worst effects will emerge slowly. This is a post from the New York Times by Herbert L. Abrams. The history of the 20th century is a confirmation of the wisdom that the impossible is always possible. Whether in the destruction of Challenger or in the meltdown at Chernobyl, the seeds of disaster were planted long before the event, and the repercussions will be felt long after. What are the likely environmental and health effects of Chernobyl? For a few in the immediate vicinity who were heavily exposed to radiation, it could mean death within days, weeks, or months depending on the extent of the exposure. For many, for many others who were exposed to less severe but still critical amounts of radiation, it could mean bone marrow death that could occur in weeks to months. Fluid replacement, antibiotics, and stringent sterile precautions may save many in this group. At least 14 different isotopes drifted into Scandinavia, including the hazardous radioactive iodine and cesium. As the wind's directions changed, countries adjacent to the Ukraine, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and Austria experienced increased levels of radioactivity. Radioactive iodine is deposited on the soil and in plants ingested by cows and appears quickly in milk. Once ingested, it accumulates in the thyroid gland and may destroy thyroid tissues and ultimately produce thyroid nodules and even cancer. Cesium is threatening because it continues to produce radiation for decades after it's been taken up by human tissues. What of the area around Chernobyl? Land within 5 to 15 miles of the reactor may be contaminated for many years and could be uninhabitable. Over days, weeks, and months, as fallout settles to the ground, water, lakes, rivers, and crops may be contaminated at distances beyond the immediate area. A major concern of the Chernobyl accident is not only the reservoir that supplies Kiev, which must have increased radioactivity, but the Dnieper River that flows out of the reservoir and south to the Black Sea, both immediately and for weeks and months thereafter. The use of impure water must be sharply restricted, and contaminated agriculture products impounded. The expense of the 3-mile island, huge though as it was, may pale beside the Chernobyl accident. Any estimate must include the cost of evacuating and relocating thousands of people, of medical care for hundreds with radiation sickness and possibly burns, of workdays lost, of a sustained interruption of 1/7 of all Soviet's nuclear power for the Ukraine and Eastern Europe, the decontamination of a large area that may remain hot, excessively radioactive for months or years. Agricultural products that must be junked, the property cannot be used. The pressure will be great to close or redesign these reactors without appropriate contamination, and the cost attached to all new Soviet reactors will rise sharply. The human tragedy of the dead, injured, and evacuated is clearly the central concern of the world community, but the secondary effects of Chernobyl are inestimable, and none are more aware of this than those in the nuclear power industry in this country and in other lands. Alright guys, that was a previously secret document that has now been declassified, as of November 10th, 2011. So I hope you guys like it. If you guys do, make sure to share out the video to other people so that they can view it. The link is right up here. You can simply find this by going to the CIA website and typing in Chernobyl at the top. That particular one, it looks like it's called Economic Cost of the Chernobyl Incident, which would be along this page right here. This is the article I was just reading. All you have to do is type it in right here. That was just a different search product. So thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and give me a thumbs up and share this out to your friends so that more people can see these declassified information from the CIA website. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.